Hi friends, my name is Christina Grozik and I am with a documentary called Going which is an exploration of sound. So to keep the discussion about sound going, we've been talking with different people, seeing how they use sound. And today with me, I'm really excited because we've got Tom Syrowski with me. And he's gonna talk about the world of sound from a producer, from a sound engineer and mixer perspective. So those are a lot of things and you do them all. So can you break it down for us a little bit? What does a music producer do? What does a sound engineer do? What does a mixer do? How are those different? Because I think a lot of people, they hear the music and they're like, that's awesome. And someone's like, well, yeah, I'm a sound engineer. And they're like, I don't know what that is, but the music's awesome. So what are those elements? Can you kind of tell us a little bit about them?
So I'll just start with sound engineering and recording engineering because that's kind of where I come from and my beginnings in the world of making records. I learned how to make records at a recording studio here in LA, Henson Recording Studios. I went to school to become a sound engineer. So I'll just start with that. Sound engineering, when you're making a record, go ahead.
Yeah, for 1 second. So I noticed you kind of just inserted it, but I think it's definitely something that should be recognized. So you said Henson.
Oh,
So
yes.
the people that are like, oh, well, what's Henson? Do you want to tell them
Oh,
the...
sure. Yeah, I should. Henson Recording Studios, before it was Henson Record, by the way, when I say Henson Recording Studios, it is the Jim Henson Company. So the Muppets, all of that stuff goes on there. There was a recording studio that is on the lot that used to be A&M Records, which is super famous. The Carpenters, Joe Cocker's Mad Dogs and Englishmen was recorded on the lot. George Harrison used to have his offices there. Before that, it was Charlie Chaplin's studio. So all of these black and white silent films that you see, what's the guys, the Tramp with the mustache and the walks all funny in the cane, all that stuff happened there. And so the lot has a lot of history. It was an amazing place for me to come to in LA to start working in the industry. It's got a lot of super, amazing energy around it. So that's where I started. That's where I learned how to be in a room. And when I say be in a room, I mean like records get made in a recording studio. There's the control room with a big console. I'm sure you've seen with all the knobs on it. And they're like, everybody always asks me, do you know what all those knobs do? Well, it's pretty easy. They're all just like a strip. And so if you just learn what goes on from sort of here to here on the console, you know what all the other knobs do. It's very simple once you just learn that little bit. So yes, when people ask me, do I know what all the knobs do? Of course I know what all the knobs do. There's also a live room. The live room is where you set up a drum kit, you set up guitar amps, you put singers, microphones. Pretty much most of the time when you're recording an album, the drums, almost every single bit of a drum kit has a microphone on it. Some things have two microphones on it, like the kick drum of a drum kit has a microphone that goes on the inside of the kick drum and the outside. Some people record those on two separate tracks. Some people blend them together. You can do that. Now, when I say separate tracks, if someone's listening to a song on their phone, that is a stereo, that's a left-right, that's it. That happens at the end of the process of the recording. That is the mix down, which I'll get to. But in the beginning of the recording process, when you have a full drum kit, you have a bunch of guitar amps, bass amps, everything's recorded on separate tracks. So you have between 24, 48, 6, it can go on and on. Some records have more tracks than I even want to like wrap my head around.
And when you're saying tracks, just when you're saying tracks, and earlier you said that little strip, each thing has its own strip. Is that
Yes.
That would be the track?
Each thing has, so like back in the early days of recording, you would have you think like back cassette tapes back in when in whatever 80s and 90s we would listen to, because we'd get our what I get the new whatever Pearl Jam tape. That's that's magnetic tape. Think about that, but it's about 2 inches thick. That would take 24 tracks of audio. So I don't know, kick drum, snare drum, hi-hat, all these different elements of a drum kit, guitar amps. Sometimes you have 2 guitar players, so you have to have 2 separate tracks for them. Bass guitar. A lot of times when you record bass guitar, you want to record a direct signal, which is basically the bass player goes out of his bass into a box that goes into a mic pre. You record that on a track. Then you also have an amplifier that you mic also. So sometimes the bass player, everybody thinks he's sort of like secondary because the guitar player is like the guy out front and he's like strutting and playing guitar solos. The bass player actually gets more tracks a lot of time in the basic tracking side of things. Singers, you got the mic, you got one vocal mic. Everybody has their own setup, their own sound. Guitar amps go in one booth, one room, because you want things to be isolated. So when you solo the guitar mic on your set of tracks on your console, the big console with the knobs, you hit solo, you don't hear the bass, you don't hear the vocals, you don't hear the drum kit. You might hear a little bit just because everybody's all in the same room. If the guitar player is standing close to the drum kit, you might actually hear the drums going through the guitar pickup. That happens. That's what we call like amazingness, because sometimes that sounds really cool. Like the Rolling Stones actually made a record called Let It Bleed, which I believe, I could be wrong. Somebody's gonna comment on this and say, Tom, that wasn't what that was. In my mind, that's what it was. They all got into a room and just kind of played everything all together. So when it comes to like what I do, where I come from, sound engineering is making all of those things, all of those elements sound really, really good all at the same time. So you have a big console with all these faders and everything, and just blending that all together. And then once all that happens and you have that recording, you have to make all of that go to the headphones of the musicians. The musicians need to hear things, and it needs to sound really good. If they're like, we're trying to record, they're pouring their heart and soul out into a song that you're recording, and it doesn't sound right in their headphones, it's not going to sound good. The take's not going to sound good. So it's really important for me as a recording engineer to make all that sound really, really good, so that when they hear it in their headphones, they're like, this is amazing. We sound so good. We're like the best band in the world. Even though maybe they're not, in their minds they are. That is going to translate into the recording process. So their song is going to sound the best it's ever going to sound played by them, because you, the sound engineer, have done your job and made it sound really good. So that's sort of like, and it's juggling, and it's dealing with people, and sometimes you have to like, hey man, play that again, or sit there and hit the kick. I'm pretending like I'm hitting the talkback button. There's a button in the room that you hit, and then you all of a sudden you're the voice that everybody hears. And sometimes the guy just sits and hits the kick drum for a while until you make it sound good. There's like a famous story of Metallica's Black Album where Lars Ulrich, the drummer, took 5 days to get the snare drum to sound the way that and I don't know if that was the engineer, I don't know if that was the producer, I don't know if that was Lars, but it took them collectively 5 days to make the snare drum sound the way they wanted to. Now, I go and listen to that record right now, snare drum sounds pretty good. Does it sound like it took 5 days to get that snare drum sound? I don't know. That's just my opinion, and that's the great thing about music, is everybody can have opinion about it. And, anyway, I don't take 5 days to get snare sounds. I have to get my drum sound. If I'm lucky, I get a day to get everything sounding good, and then the band shows up and they start playing and they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds better than everything's ever. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times there's no budget for that extra day. So I have to get up really early, get into the studio, make sure everything's set up. I have an assistant that's always amazing and like helps set everything up, and get everything rocking and rolling. And in those situations, I'm literally making everything sound the way that I want it to sound up until we say, okay, that's the first take. That sounded great. So you're always tweaking things. You're always trying to make things sound better. At least I am. I'm never really happy. It's why I could never do live sound, because the band get done playing. I only get I get 3 minutes to make that song sound good. And whereas I want more time than that. I'm too much of a perfectionist to ever do that. So that is, from a sound engineering standpoint, that's kind of, I mean, that's a very, very short sum up, but it's detailed. I feel like that's kind of like, that's really like what my day is. Now I sit and we'll do takes, and you got to tell guitar players to tune their guitar, because in their head, they're just like, oh, this sounds great. No, dude, your guitar is out of tune. I need you to tune that up, or have somebody tune it up. So there's a lot of that going on. And there's a bedside manner, because you're dealing with musicians, and they all are, highly emotional people. They're artists. You have to just kind of handle them with kid gloves, which I've become very good at. I need that sometimes, so I have a good idea of what that needs to be. So dealing with musicians is a big part of sound engineering too, but that's not really like the sound. That's not what we're talking about.
That's part of it, because it's the energetic value to it. So you were talking earlier about how they're listening. So if I'm understanding the process correctly, the process would be before the band gets there, unless you have a prep day. If you have a prep day, you would make sure that everything is mic'd properly, and it's all on these tracks that we're referring to. So
Yep.
everything's got its own microphone, so it's recording separately. Each component is being recorded separately. So we'll get into why here in a second, but
Sure.
prep this, and you make sure that the sound in the microphone position, how it's positioned, the setup, the connection, everything is working properly. So when the band does get there, then the band comes in, they put on their earphones, they are listening to what they are playing, and that's such an art. And it goes back to the energetic value of it, because if someone feels that something isn't connecting, if there's not that connection, right, then that drops the energy. If they're connecting with it, it feels good, and it's this high vibrational aspect to it, then they're going to exceed and excel, right? So I mean, it's so important in the attention to detail that you must put into every single instrument, every single microphone that is, like, gathering the sound that's being produced. I mean, that is a lot. And when we hear music, as the listener, we're not thinking about the process that everything goes in. So you said some can be like 24 tracks, and they can go up to, how many tracks have you worked with?
I mean, I've seen 100 tracks. I mean, that is with overdubs. I'm talking about, like, the most I think I've ever recorded in a basic tracking, because those initial recordings is what we call basic tracking. Typically it's just drums, bass, guitar. It's the initial sort of like outline of what the song is, unless you've got a band that's just what they do. There's no overdubs really necessary in what they do sometimes. I mean, the most is around 48 tracks. That just depends. It's a lot. Yeah, I mean, not everything's getting in my process. If we're going to record keyboards, if we're going to record guitar, I have everything set up. And sometimes there's more elements, like orchestral elements. I've done big sessions where there's an orchestra and a horn section, and then there's the drum kit over there, and then there's a guitar player, and there's a harpist, and it's piano, all of these different things. So you can get out of hand with how many tracks you have pretty quickly. But for the most part, if it's in what I've done in the past, which is rock music mostly, it's drums, bass, guitar, vocals, keyboards, maybe. So I try and keep it at 24 tracks, just because. And that's also, like, when I first started, even though it was the very end of recording with 2-inch tape, because most of the time everything's recorded digitally now, I just try and keep it that low, because when you've got a band out in the live room, technical issues like computers not working or them bogging down or anything like that, you just don't want to be that guy. these guys are out there and they're just like, like I said before, they're pouring their heart and soul out into whatever it is that they're doing. If the computer stops working and they're paying whatever it is, $2,000 a day to use the room, like not a good vibe for what's going on. And you're gonna bring the energy level of everything down, and you can't always get that back. Sometimes you're just like, we're just gonna start over tomorrow. This isn't working. So yeah.
Yeah, so okay, so then you have all of these tracks. So now
Yep.
we move into the mixing component, right?
The
So
mixing component.
what is the reason that all of these would be recorded separately?
Recorded separately, well, you want to have control over what's going on. Specifically, like multi-tracking of instruments, the drum kit is the most important thing that's multi-tracked out, because you have your overhead mics, you have kick drum mic, snare drum mic, all of those things have to kind of like go together and sound just like one thing coming at you. And so you want to have control over all of those things. And that's why everything is multi-tracked out, because if you back in the old days when it was just 4 tracks, because all those Beatles records, those amazing records that just like, I can't believe how great this sounds, those were recorded on 4-track tape machines. That was it. They just had 4 tracks and they would just kind of bounce things down. So the drum kits that those guys recorded were probably 2-3 mics, maybe just 2 mics, and they moved the mics around until they sounded just right. But they were absolutely stuck with just that sound. If you were to do, when you multi-track everything out and say, oh, this song sounds like it should have more room mics. So you take those 2 room mics, the left, right room mics, and you turn them up. Or you just, I don't think there should be any room mics. I want a super dry drum kit. Or he doesn't hit the toms at all through this song. I'm going to turn the toms completely off because there's resonant sounds coming from the bottom heads of the toms, which makes everything sound funny. You know, that sort of thing actually makes the bass guitar sound out of tune sometimes. So you want to be able to just mess around with things, and that way later on down the line, when you start to mix, if someone says, hey, can you turn the bottom snare mic up? I think the bottom snare mic should be louder on this song. Boom, you just turn it up. And so that's why you want to have everything multi-tracked out.
Okay, so the different tracks, it basically allows you, so you have the artist, you have the musician in there and they're performing, so they're creating their art. And then on the mixing side, that's an art too, because you're taking these different tracks and you can control and manipulate them to have the final product. So you can either turn up the volume, you can lower the volume, and like you said, you're bringing that entire drum kit together that has multiple microphones around it.
Yeah.
It sound as one unit. So you can take all of the different tracks because they're on their own. Well, I guess it would be track would be the word. Yeah. And you can manipulate that to get the sound that you would like. So you're in the mixing process. You're really, I mean, that's such an art because you're creating the actual music.
Yeah, you're taking your basic tracks and your overdubs, because once you do the basic tracking and everything like that, there is overdubs that happen. There's percussion, shakers, tambourines. There's a bunch of background vocals. There's a bunch of extra guitars that have to, you want to build it up, make it. You don't always want to, but a lot of times you want to build up and put a bunch of extra stuff on there because, it sounds really good a lot of times. And when you get into the mixing process, it is then you are then putting all of that stuff together, blending it all together and making it so you get the sound that you want. Sometimes it's a vibe where you want it to be very roomy. You want everything to sound kind of distant. So you can do that because you have everything on individual tracks. Sometimes you want everything to sound super present and modern. So you have that availability to just turn up the close mics, not use too much reverb, because in the mixing process, you're also adding effects. You're adding compression, which kind of makes everything sound, first of all, it can level things out so you don't have things jumping out. When you're mixing, you want everything to kind of sit in a certain level. But yeah, then you start, EQ things differently, which is, making the lows higher, or making, making something sound chimier by turning up the high end on it. Reverb effects, delays, that sort of thing. All of these things get added in the mixing process till you have whatever it is that either the mixer has envisioned for the song, or the artist that's sitting right next to you is explaining, this is what I was thinking about. Sometimes it's him trying to say, oh, I want it to sound, more like this. And he's got some sort of random description of what it should sound like. Or he says, I want it to sound like Led Zeppelin. And okay, we're gonna make the kick drum sound big and huge, like it's in a big room. Guitars are gonna be really loud, and the vocals are gonna be really loud. It's just really it just all depends on what everybody wants the song to be. And multi-tracking everything out, everything spread out on individual tracks is what allows that process to change as you get into the mixing process.
So you're creating like an atmosphere. You're creating the foundation for what that sounds like.
Yeah.
So from the time because I've been in recording studios, and how drastically different is it when you hear the artist, you're in the room, you hear what they're playing, and then you hear the final product. Can you talk a little bit about that from what we as the listener hears after the process has concluded versus what is happening when they're recording it?
Right. So sometimes it's drastically different. It just really depends on the artist. It depends on if it's say it's a solo artist and you're kind of building the track from a lot of times, if it's a solo artist and they don't have a band, you start with that solo artist and someone, a producer or that solo artist playing acoustic guitar. And you just kind of like get the bare bones of what the song is. And then you say, okay, that sounds like a good sort of like a good place to start. Let's add some bass. Great. Okay, we add some bass. Then we got a little bit more of a vibe going on. Let's put like some sort of like percussive, whether it be drums, whether it be a shaker, tambourine, you kind of build it up that way. So that's a little bit of a reverse way of building stuff. And I've done that a lot more. Not having my own studio, I have to sort of work a little bit backwards sometimes. And so I've done that a lot. And I actually like that process just as much as getting a full band in a recording studio. So depending on the artist, depending on how much sort of like, I did a record in October with this band called Dirty Honey. They're here, LA band, rock band, sort of a AC/DC Aerosmith vibe, but they're young guys. And the songs that we tracked in the studio to what it sounds like on the record, it's really very, very, very close. Like what we did those days, they're really good players. We made it sound really good in the studio. And now the mixes, they just have a little bit like of a shine to them. Because there's not a lot of overdubs. They didn't say, oh, we're going to put a bunch of pianos. There's not a lot of background vocals or percussion. So in that instance, from the beginning, the basic tracking to the mix and the mastering of the record coming out is a very, very close sound. Other artists that I've worked with, the tracking happens, and when you're in the studio, it's not always like we got this song and we know exactly what it sounds like. They got a song, they have an idea of what it sounds like, but once they record it, they start adding more things. Oh, wow, this sounds better with piano, or this sounds better with all these keyboards, or I have a crazy idea for this insane like Queen vocal that is going to go onto the, so sometimes sounds absolutely, I mean, it's the same song, you hear the melodies, you hear hooks that are similar to what you had when the basic tracks, but it turns into a whole nother thing. It's just really like some artists create in the studio. Some artists just, it is what it is. It's simple enough for them in their minds, their music. And when I say simple enough, I don't use that in a negative way. It's just some music is more simple than other music. Some music is just sort of easier to hear what it ends up being from the very beginning than other music. So to answer your question, it really just depends on the music, depends on the artist, whether or not something sounds the same. Now, if you're talking about if I have a singer in a studio that can't really sing and I have to do all of my like engineering magic that I do, that sort of thing happens. I won't say who those people are at all, but I will say it happens. And it is my job as an engineer and Pro Tools engineer also, because recording engineering, Pro Tools engineering, a lot of times go hand in hand, but sometimes they're different. My Pro Tools, my editing and stuff like that is good enough. It's good enough to where you as the listener will never know when that person couldn't sing, and that's my job. It is my job. If I can't hear it, which is the sort of the barometer of where everything is. Like I hear everything when I hear songs. Sometimes it's just like, that sounds terrible. Whereas not everybody would hear that as sounding terrible, because it's just everybody has different ears. Like when we were talking earlier about hearing a DJ spinning a record and then mixing another song after it, and they have to speed the next song up to match the previous song. And then all of a sudden it's this song that I have heard numerous times. I know exactly what it's supposed to sound like, tempo wise, pitch wise, and not everybody, I'm probably the 1% of people in the room that know that that's not right. And so it's just, it's come with the territory, come with what I've done, to where it's my job to make everything sound really, really good. So where there's no like, that sounds weird, that doesn't sound right to me. Because a lot of times with music, in my experience, people hear a song and there's something about it that they don't like, but they don't know what it is. They just know they don't like it. And so it's my job to kind of erase all of those possibilities as much as I can, figure out what it is that they're going to hear that they're not going to like, and just kind of remove that stuff.
Very detail oriented. Yeah. And
very detail oriented is what I personally am. I don't know that everybody's that way when it comes to recording engineering and making records, but I am extremely detail oriented until I'm not, because sometimes I'm just like, whatever, man, it's fine. You know, that happens. I do get there where like, okay, it's fine. Let's just move on.
well, there's a certain point, and I think even in making films, like you could tweak and tweak and tweak forever, right? And I mean, even after you see a project, you're like, we could have done this or that, and it just is what it is. Sometimes you have to learn when to walk away and when to pursue it. So, and the example I was thinking in my head was definitely, it was an actor, and I would never say who, but they did not want to sing this song because they're like, I can't hold the tune to save my life. And I think the production made sure they had a really good engineer that promised this actor, I am going to make you sound like a professional singer. And it did, and everything worked out. But it's amazing when you can tweak things and manipulate it in a way that, I mean, hypothetically, maybe somebody couldn't hold a tune, but you could make them sound, and they could sell all of these hit albums or records, whatever they're being called, right? Downloads.
Yeah.
And never tour. So
but even now they tour and they have live auto tune where they sing right through it, or it's all lip synced anyway. So like, and they even have it now, and I've seen this where, and you have to be actually like really on your stuff to do this, but there are artists where they have backing tracks, but there's certain parts that they don't. And a lot of times it has to do, like, say, like you have a singer that does a lot of dancing. They know where their intense dance steps are. So that part of the track is there and it's pre-recorded. So when they're performing live and they get to these crazy dance steps, but they're still supposed to be singing, it's a background track. And then they get to a part that's a lot easier and they can just kind of walk around. It's the background track is cut and it's actually them singing on the microphone. It's nuts. It's crazy the way things have gotten. And I'm okay with all of it because it's all art and it's all performance. And I dig anybody that's out there just kind of like making art and putting it out there and putting themselves out there, I think is important. So
yeah, but I mean, that's really interesting. And that probably answers the questions that a lot of people have asked when they see somebody dancing and they're still singing, like, and you're like, how are they even breathing right now, let alone singing? So, you know, that might have just answered how that's possible.
oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So yeah, very informative. So what has your sound journey, what has it taught you? What have you learned from sound?
Well, I've always loved music, and I've always I guess I always when I first like really like got into music and got into like wanting to like be a part of music in some way, I went out and bought a guitar, and I started learning guitar and I started learning how to play. And I probably within like a first couple years, realized that I was not getting any better at playing guitar. But I knew that all I wanted to do was work in music. And so I figured out, I can go do this other thing. I don't need to be I don't need to be a performer. It's okay. I don't need to be the singer. I don't need to be the guitar solo. I don't need to be doing any of that stuff. I just want to work in music. I want to work with my heroes. I want to be a part of creating records. It's the thing that I've always loved. And so I figured, okay, I'm just going to go like learn how to become an engineer. And that turned into coming to LA and getting and working at the studio. And that turned into all of a sudden, I'm standing in the same room with Eddie Vedder, and I'm standing in the same room with Bruce Springsteen. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what I did, but I did something right, because there's my heroes. My heroes are here, and I'm here, and I'm involved with helping them create their art. And so I'm a part of the art creation process. I'm a part of, and I'm doing it's not like I'm helping them do their album cover, which, you know, more power to people that do that. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. I'm helping them with the part of their art that I love the most. And so I don't know if it's what I've learned. I guess I learned there was something that I wanted to do, and I tried a couple things and I wasn't good at them. And then I tried a couple other things and I was good at them. And it ended up turning out like in a really good way for me. So my persistence in it, and I guess I got to a point where it wasn't just I was helping out with the art. What I had learned about sound, what I'd learned about audio engineering, became more I guess who I was, to the point where like it's what I think about during the day. I think about, man, like, am I gonna get to like mix a song today? That's awesome. Like I get to be a part of creating something that other people are gonna listen to, you're gonna listen to, my girlfriend's gonna listen to, my brothers and sisters are gonna listen to, and in 10 years, somebody might listen to it. In 20 years, somebody might listen to it. It's going to be around forever. And that to me is awesome. That to me is sort of like immortalizing. And they're not going to listen to the song and say, hey, Tom Syrowski engineered that. They're probably going to say whatever it is that means something to them about it, but it's still going to be there. So I don't know if that's something I've learned in my sound journey. I just know that, I have figured out that I wanted to do something and gotten good at it, and then realized, oh my gosh, I really dig manipulating sound. I like putting a microphone into a trash can and put it in front of a guitar amp and then making a sound out of that. To me, that is, I saw a video of Sylvia Massey, who's an old school recording engineer and producer, and she was working with this guy, Buzz Osborne, who was in what the heck's the name? The Melvins. And she was running his guitar sound through dill pickles and recording the sound. Like, who thinks of this stuff? But it's what people do. It's like the weird stuff, like people go into their bathroom. The reason it sounds good when you sing in the shower is because of all the reflections. Bathrooms are usually tile. So now people put microphones into bathrooms and sing in the bathroom. It's just, it's this crazy stuff. It's like this whole wacky world of that nobody really thinks about unless you're an audio geek like me. And like I was telling you earlier, I'm just like, I geek out on audio stuff. I geek out on gear and guitars, and I don't even really play guitar, but I own guitars. I love guitars, you know, like I love all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's so important though. And I mean, that is your area of interest, but your area of interest is providing a gift to so many. So I
Right.
mean, music is such a personal thing and it impacts us, I think, on a soul level. Like it moves us. There's something
Yep.
about music that moves us. And to know that you're a part of that and that you're helping to create that and you're setting the foundation and the atmosphere that invites that and allows that is something so magical. I think that's so cool.
Yeah,
So
I
cool.
agree.
So yeah, thank you for all of your work in this industry. Because
Thank you.
I mean, I can't tell you the years that most things in my life have happened. A couple, maybe here and there. Most things, can't tell you. People ask me years all the time. I'm like, I have no idea. But I can tell you the songs I was listening to. I could tell you what was out. So I could create an entire timeline of my life just on music, right? So
Yeah,
music, it impacts us, right? So
yeah, it really does.
with so many different artists, are there any situations or journeys or experiences that really stand out to you, and that and why? Why was that?
Um, so I already said like that my first love, I guess, of music was Bruce Springsteen because of my dad and my mom, and you know this just from knowing them, like it's Springsteen is sort of like our thing, and everybody that we know knows this. So getting to work with Bruce and traveling to New York, and the whole E Street Band was there, and it was, and sitting down, and Bruce is right there, and Little Steven's right there, and like it's mind blowing. All of this whole thing's happening, and and it's just like I'm like you know, a 5-year-old, and that's the music that there was nothing else that got played in the house. It was all Springsteen all the time, and so it was my youth, and so that getting to work with Bruce, huge standout thing. Now, when I became a teenager, when I was 13 years old or whatever, and grunge happened, Pearl Jam was the best thing that ever happened in music to me. And so, I'm moving forward. I got to work with Pearl Jam. I actually engineered a Pearl Jam record, and so those are other heroes that I got to work with. And I mean, every artist that I get to work with it's always ends up being like a huge pleasure. There's artists that I would never listen to, just like I would have never listened to unless I worked with them. And then it becomes like a thing where like, oh, I like those guys, and I like they're really nice, like good guys and stuff. So my journey in music has brought things to me that I would have never like seeked out myself, which I think is a good thing and a cool thing. But yeah, I mean, how can you go, like, where do you go from Springsteen and Pearl Jam? I don't know, but I'm trying. I'm sure that there's some other people I need to, that I know specifically there's some other people that I really would love to work with that I haven't yet. So I still have things to do. There's no like retiring, which I'm gonna retire. I'm 40 something years old, so I'm not gonna.
No, you still have plenty of music to create, so we can all take it in.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, because yeah, we still have a lot ahead of us, and I still need songs to put on that timeline moving
Yeah,
forward. So yeah. So,
right on.
Tom, what are some of your favorite sounds? Like when you hear these sounds, it's like everything is right in the world, and it is the most present moment you've experienced.
Like individual sounds, I guess is what you're asking. Like if I hear like an individual sound, like
It,
a guitar, is that what you're, I mean, is that
well,
what you're asking?
yeah, so I'll give you an example. So one of the sounds that as soon as I hear it, and it always comes at these moments in my life where it's like things are really crazy, right? And then I hear the sound and it's like, oh, nothing else matters. Why am I like, why is this a thing? This isn't a thing because now I've just heard the sound and it's like a reset button and it just moves through my entire being. Like the sound of a mourning dove for me does that.
Mm.
I know for some people they've indicated like water or the ocean, so like are there sounds like that for you? It could, I mean, maybe it is like a guitar. What is it
Well,
for you?
that, now that you've kind of like helped me out with it, I being from Ohio and coming to LA where it doesn't rain, when I hear rain, when I hear rain on hitting roofs, when I hear, I was just someplace where the roof of the building was like a tin roof, and it was raining, and I just rain hitting water, being on the lake, that sort of thing, like, and what the things that come along with that, thunder, that sort of stuff, like whatever it is about that, like it that you smell it, it's it kind of just kind of like wraps you up. And so I guess if that was that, I mean, that's makes the most sense to me, that it'd be like that sort of thing, and not just like sprinkling rain. I'm talking about like sheets of rain, any kind of rain. I love all that stuff. It's sort of, it puts me to sleep. If it's raining at night, it's like the greatest sleep I ever get if it's raining at night. So so yeah, I guess that makes the most sense to me, that it would be that.
Yeah, I understand that. And when you said that you can even smell it, it's like a multi-sensory experience. It really
Uh-huh.
is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. So, with sound, where do you think it will be used in the future? Like, how do you think we're going to use sound in the future?
Well, I think that I think that there is a lot to sound being used in therapeutical ways, because like we were talking about with just like sound baths and everything like that, like we are made up of however much, what is the percentage of water in our body, is what is it, 75% of the human body is water. I don't know, is that right? I do music, not
Yeah, no, yeah. I always say between like 70 and 80%, right?
sure. So thinking about that, and thinking about the healing qualities of, and I'm not saying like the I turn my stereo on real loud. What you have sitting behind you, and I've experienced sound baths, and I know what they can do to me physically, and I know that in our like in day-to-day life, people don't. You were talking about just being where you are now, and not everybody really them saying, you do what is, you do sounding like, what is, I don't know what that is. It is amazing, and I feel like moving forward, I feel like it's going to become a much more important thing. It's going to become much wider and brought into wider use, mainly because of how we both know that it works, that it can do a lot of things for people. I've had the best night of sleep of my life after a sound bath. I uh, went to a sound bath for a birthday, and it was incredible, incredible, amazing sound bath. I think that there were probably 6 or 7 practitioners there all around the room. Some people had glass bowls, some people had Tibetan bowls, some people were doing the ocean drums, hitting bells, that sort of thing. So it was like a full-on immersive experience, to the point where like I was like starting to like have like a moment And I woke up the next morning to record, and I had to go record an album the next day. And I was talking to the guy, and I still tell him about like this guy, and I'm just like, that's the best. I feel like the best recording I ever did was the morning after I did this incredible sound bath. And I stand by that. I love that record. And I feel like that whole day and everything, so while it's really good for me and my body, I feel like just whatever it did, setting my mind right in the tone and the sound and everything like that, it really kind of aligned me in that moment. And I feel like it could do that if I was a surgeon, a brain surgeon, I don't know, whatever, random brain surgeon, and I went and did that sound bath and had to operate on someone's brain the next day, that I would probably say that was the smoothest, turned out the best brain surgery that I've ever done. So I don't think it's just, it's a sound bath, so of course the sound engineer is going to have a good day the next day. I think it does. I think it helps everyone. I think it's, if someone's a landscaper, they're going to make that person's yard look better than anybody else's yard that they ever did, because they did a sound bath the night before. And that's just, I really believe that. I believe that wholeheartedly, that like sound healing is incredibly important, and that should be just, it should be prescribed. I feel like you should, like, it should be like, you should be able to like use your insurance to go do sound baths, I feel your health insurance. So I just, that's what I think about it.
Yeah, well, that is awesome, and I couldn't agree with you more. Obviously, that's where I'm at. But yeah, and just so everybody else knows, when we talked about this before, we didn't talk about any of this.
Oh, right. We didn't talk about this. No. Right.
I'm not saying this because of that, right? So
no, not at all.
Lovely conversation before, and I will say this: I was speaking with a woman the other day, and she was telling me that she's also a filmmaker, and she was telling me she's been, helping a lot of people in this period that we've been in of COVID, right? Where a lot of people felt really isolated, and she's been interviewing a lot of people and asking them like how they are getting through it, if they're, kind of isolated and by themselves and they don't really have any kind of socialization. And just throwing it back to you, one of the things that she said is a lot of people have said that their companion throughout this period in very lonely or could be lonely times has been music. So
wow.
Music throughout their day has been what has gotten them through this period, and they haven't felt like they were alone. They felt like they had company with them through the music they were listening to throughout their days. So bravo to what you're doing, and I know you've done that on so many different levels and in so many different ways that you've contributed to that. So that's really important. And like I said before, can't tell you most years things have happened, but music, yes. And there's so magical about that too, in just the recall of it. And that's one of the things that we learned on this film. We talked to someone that went for a nap, and then all of a sudden he woke up from the nap and couldn't hear. So, and opera was his passion. It was like the thing that he loved. He said he loved two things in his life: his wife and opera. Those were his two loves. And he missed the most the sound of the music, and he ended up getting the cochlear implant. And when he did, I think he said about 40% he could hear, but his memory made up the rest of it. So yeah, we record it right in our heads. So I mean, music, huge, so important to our lives and our well-beings, right? So yeah, thank you. Is there anything that you want to add on the front of sound or energy or anything of that nature?
I actually no. I feel like I've covered kind of everything I had to. The dog just ran by. Yeah, I feel. Here she is. Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I'm really glad to have been able to talk to you, and I'm stoked that you do what you do, and I'm glad that you are stoked I do what I do. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Long distance high five, right?
Yeah, right? Boom.
Well, hey, thank you so much for your time, Tom Syrowski. Really appreciate it. Keep shining, keep doing what you're doing, keep bringing us all of that amazing music that you do. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much.